Good morning, everybody. Back by popular demand, we're going to speak today to my first guest, the first guest ever on the Miller Report. My friend here is a client, so I talked to him about doing a podcast, and he thought it was a great idea, and he came on, I think it was about a year and a half ago, as my first guest. I think then we must have had 100 followers. Now we've got many millions, and he's not a stranger to this podcast or New York. He is a native New Yorker and the founder of Pi Capital Partners. He is a private real estate firm which performs all functions of development and management. Let's welcome Jerry Pi back to the Miller Report. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's my honor. Gosh, it's changed.
We're in a nice studio now. Remember, we were in a
year
little
and a
room?
half.
They really upped their game here at WABC.
Yes, they have. And New York's changed in this past year and a half, hasn't it?
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to be going quick because such an important year with an election coming up. The real estate vote yesterday for rent stabilization increases, so we're going to go touch on a lot of things. But let's first talk to you personally about China and about growing up and about your family. And your dad was a very remarkable, smart, ethical man. I was so proud and honored that he used Empire to help him on one of his buildings, the Elm in Flushing. Actually, Elmwood.
Elm East.
Elm East, then. Yes. So let's talk about that for a minute. Your parents immigrated from Asia. They worked hard. They started businesses. Tell us a little bit about your dad. I want to make this special and give him that honor today.
So my dad came in the early 70s with nothing. He graduated from university over in Taiwan. Came on over with nothing in his pockets. He worked for his brother, my uncle, back then at a Tiamo stationery shop. You remember those those convenience stores? And back then, it was the 70s. 70s, it was very crazy New York City back then. And then, he was working at my uncle's shop over there. And back then, it was like selling cigarettes, batteries, and all of these, small trinkets, merchandises. So he started this operation in terms of these convenience stores, and he went into photography, print fulfillment, back in the 70s, 80s. And you remember the 135 millimeter film rolls?
Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore.
That doesn't exist.
Kodak. iPhone.
You remember Kodak?
Yeah. Hello. That was.
So my father, he started his operation in terms of printing Kodak film paper. And he was one of the first ones in New York City. It was basically, he was doing the print fulfillment for medium-sized and large-sized pharmacies like CVS, Duane Reade, Genovese, back in the 70s and 80s, mom-and-pop pharmacies. And that's how he started back then. And that business was it was cash-rich business back then. And during the 70s, and you remember New York City real estate in the 70s and 80s.
The Dinkin years.
The Dinkin years. You couldn't get rid of buildings. And the 80s was a big crash. And that's where he bought his properties back then. He had to scruffle
What was his first property?
His first property was a development out in Corona, Queens, a two to four family condominium project. He lost money. He totally lost money on the project. Yes, and I think he was always a dreamer. He was not afraid to start different businesses. We had the video business. We had the cruise line.
Yeah, I remember you had all these kings on the cruise line,
yes.
And the queen of.
We started a luxury cruise line over in China in 1994 called Victoria Cruises. It was chartering ships over in China, and that was when China was just beginning in terms of the development over in China. And from that operation, he was basically acting as a diplomat between both countries, between China and America. A lot of it was cultural exchanges for that. And, you saw basically, and, my mother and I, we also worked in China for quite a bit, going back and forth, understanding the cultures here as well as the cultures over in China for the cruise business. And, we ran that for 20, 25 years until it was sold off to a government, a quasi-government agency over in 2018, 2019. But in a way, it was time. Because we saw China grow so fast.
What do you see? What was it like doing business in China, and what do you see now with all that we talk about with China? And is it as dangerous as people think? And What's your bird's eye view of what's happening between the United States and China?
I think a lot of it is information. It depends on where you get your information from, where we get our information now. Nowadays, social media is all over the place. I have to say, working in China, they have got to be the most pleasant people to work with. They're very honorable.
To your face.
Yes, to their face. Very honorable, hardworking. Oh, they're not asking about remote work. In China, it's a very different work culture over there. In China, they have something called 996. It's you're in at 9 a.m. Till 9 p.m. 6 days a week.
Wow, 996.
No such, and it was so fascinating during those the 25 years we were there in China. My God,
Wow.
We had something called japan, which is overtime. Nobody complained. You're working Saturday, Sunday.
Is that still happening?
It's still happening.
How can we compete with that? Our people want to work 3 days.
It's different. The generations changed also as well, because a lot of it's just a generational shift, because now you have something called laying flat, 躺平.
What is that?
Which is basically lying flat. I no longer want to do 70 hours a week.
Do they remotely work there, or that doesn't exist?
There's no remote work doesn't exist over there. But at the same time, it's a generational shift, because we see it here in the States as well. It's like Generation Z. They have a different work style.
Yes.
Generation Z all around the world has
balance. They want balance.
They want balance, wellness, which I completely understand.
I don't.
I know. Well, we have to.
What is that balance? I've been working since I'm like 7.
Yes.
Babysitting at 7.
I know. We're just raised differently. And I do have to say, Generation Z, give them credit. They are so much smarter because they have information. They absorb information so much quicker than us. And they'll find their way. There's some Gen Z, and now Gen Alpha kids who, they're brilliant. They have the ethic.
So who would win a war right now if we actually went to war with China? America or China?
Nobody.
You think it would be nobody?
We as Americans don't want to go to war.
Do they?
They don't. And part of it is also the proximity of everything. There's an ocean between both of us. There's an ocean between us and every other nation at this point. And you can see it right now with the conflicts in the Middle East, the conflicts over in Ukraine. The U.S., we as a population just don't want to be involved in conflict. So we have enough issues as New Yorkers. We have plenty of issues. We're going to get
into all that. But my last question on China is about Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we're going to make a move? And if you were a betting man, how would that end?
Well, as a preface, my mother was born in Taiwan.
Wow.
My father was born in Shanghai. And they got married probably almost immediately without both of their parents knowing.
And it lasted a long time.
And they were married 50 years. Wow. So I have a Taiwanese mother, a Shanghainese wife. So I don't know. To answer your question, I just don't know. Because views have changed. Views have completely changed these 40, 50 years since I grew up.
Hopefully we don't ever have to know.
Hopefully we don't have to know. Because right now we're just focused on New York City and trying to make sure we don't...
real estate. Let's talk about real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry, you're a developer, you're an owner, you're one of our investors. What do you see happening?
So we're halfway through 25?
Can't keep count. It means I'm getting older, so
yes.
I try not to recall.
So we were on what, 2 years ago?
Yep.
Right, and we talked about the rental market. So we are, a real estate family. And the last time we talked, the rental market was beginning to recover. It was in the middle of its recovery, and we have to say that and one of the hot topics, obviously, with the politicians and with the election this year is about housing, how we're not building enough housing. And unfortunately, our message really hasn't changed over the last 24 months since we last met, because housing production has fallen off. They introduced a new program, 485X, and they also introduced the office to residential conversion.
How many apartments are going to go to resi from commercial?
We'll probably have more office conversion to residential than we probably will from 485X, to be very frank. And the reason for 485X is that real estate development, what we have to do is you have to incentivize private investment into
So just so my
The
audience
neighborhoods.
understands that 45X is a replacement of 421A.
Yes.
So it's basically giving the developers some type of incentive to build, but you're saying that developers are not getting enough of an incentive because the cost to build is more than they can in rent with these new
Correct.
regulations. So we're not going to see much increase or much help here.
No, we're not. And part of what these tax abatement programs do is that it freezes the property taxes. So we have a piece of property over on Fifth Avenue right now. My property taxes are $250,000 a year, right?
You're holding that. You still
We're holding. We're holding. I mean, we're a real estate family, and unfortunately, like for my generation, it started from my father. You know, when he started all his businesses, he was smart enough to buy small buildings, all of them, at the same time. For my generation, we're probably going to have to be the ones that have to deleverage, but we won't sell. We don't sell. So going back to the tax abatement program, people. And just to explain in layman's term, say our property taxes are $250,000 on that empty piece of land. When we build it and get it fully assessed and we build a rental building over there, the taxes jump up to, without the abatement, jumps up to about, say, $1.8 to $2 million a year. What 421A and what 485X did was it froze the property taxes at the initial assessment, say $250,000 in this instance, and it's frozen for a period of time, say 35 years now. 485X is 35 years. That's the incentive, for private investment. But the challenge with 485X is that they've added a lot more regulation to this program. The biggest challenge is you go above 99 units now, you have to pay prevailing wage on the construction.
Plus 25% tax
Yes.
and all that on your employee.
Yes. I mean, 485, basically you're paying union style wages, and then also at the same time on top of that, you have to pay over 50% more on top of that for benefits, health benefits, dental, insurance.
Is there a cap on the rent you can get?
And 20% of the apartments are forever rent stabilized. So, and that'll be subject to, and right now, as you mentioned, our RGB, Rent Guideline Board, is lowering their rent range.
On just 20%. So on
Yes.
80%, you can charge anything you want?
It's 80% of the apartments become free market.
Okay, so you're going to get you're going to get taxes as if there was no building.
Correct.
But you're saying because of the salaries that you have to pay your workers, your construction workers, is too much for you to build. It makes more sense to keep empty?
For now, it does, because part of it is that because what we have a situation is that labor and material costs have gone up. So one of the areas that they can't control, right, is nobody knows how much it costs to build right now. You got rental buildings cost $500. You guys can get it down to $475 a foot, $500 a foot, $550 a foot, right? You add that on top of the land. Keep in mind, you have to buy land. Land has a certain cost. So the financially feasible way, the only way to make money right now is to build condos, right?
So why don't you build a condo there?
Well, part of it is that,
Who's buying?
Who's buying? No, part of it is that it's not within our family. It doesn't align with the values of our family. We're
I don't
New
know that I
Yorkers.
could feel sorry for you here, Jerry.
Right, they're
You're
not gonna
saying
feel
you
sorry.
could make money on a condo, but you can't on a rental. We do need people to buy.
We do need people to buy, but part of it is also interest rates right now.
Right.
Economically, the interest rates, the 10-year, inflation is not decreasing fast enough. The Fed this year, what are they saying? Maybe one or two cuts. And looking at where inflation is right now, I mean, we probably would be lucky with one or two cuts this year. Part of it is
Would you build then to buy as a condo?
you could. Well, we're looking at trying to build it as a rental.
I understand, but you said you can't make money because of labor.
Right.
So the question is, if interest rates comes down and you know that you could sell
We would
faster,
always
would you do condo?
as a family office. We would always look to try and. Part of it is that this city's got problems, but the city has been very fair to my family and I, and we will always be as a New Yorker.
Be a rental, okay?
Yes, for us right now we have rent stabilized tenants. We have hundreds of rent stabilized tenants, and I have to say they have actually been 99% of them. It's like family. Right? You can stand 90% of your family, but come Thanksgiving, it's always that 10% of your family.
The ones that don't pay.
The ones that, yes, that uncle, that crazy uncle you have at Thanksgiving, right?
We're gonna talk about that in a minute. Who is buying? What do you see right now in the market? Are you still buying?
Are we still buying? We are looking.
You haven't come to me for any deals lately. I'm very confused.
Because part of it is that you have owners that are locked in at 4%. The rental income is very good.
Right.
Right? And everyone's in a pause and wait mode. Homeowners, and the only ones buying right now are homeowners, right? That have to buy because of family changes. They have a kid come on the way. They want to stay.
What about investment properties? You see that? Are you buying those?
No, we're not buying investment properties because it's just cap rates aren't, owners aren't incentivized. It's the same thing as asking us, would we sell right now? No, we're getting very good rents. We're getting healthy, cap rates.
What kind of return are you getting?
We're almost mid fives, sixes.
But it's about almost at the level of the banks. So
it's almost at the level of the banks.
But you have real estate. You own it.
Yeah, we own the real estate. And I keep, we keep hearing this news, is it better to buy or to rent? And for everybody, it's a different story.
I can't think of one person that could tell you that if they bought a piece of real estate 30 years ago that they did not make money. In the long run, it's always better to own.
In the long run.
It's always better to own.
And it depends. If somebody has a 3 or 4 year outlook, just rent.
I disagree, but okay.
Yeah, but once you go past, going back to what you just said, once you go past 7, 8, 9 years, if you have an opportunity, buy.
So do you think the Canadians coming out of the market is going to affect New York or the real estate market?
It already has with hospitality. Hotel. I mean, we have a couple hotel investments in the city. It's been down March, April. First half of this year, it's been soft.
Because they're very patriotic people and they don't want to come here. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes. And every country is. There's a huge, and we see it globally, you see it all around the world, a huge nationalist following. In Canada, in Britain, in China, they just don't, it's become deglobalized right now, unfortunately.
And are the Chinese buying? What's your take on that?
No, they're not. The Chinese aren't buying.
There's like they're not even allowed to buy, right?
They're not allowed to buy. It's very difficult for them to get the money out.
Tell us about that. What changed? What happened there?
Well, the Chinese who wanted to buy bought 10 years ago.
Right.
8, 9,
it was
10
like
years
an
ago.
influx.
It was an influx. You know what? To give an example, a very good example, think of the Japanese in the 80s.
Right.
They came in, bought Rockefeller Center in the 80s. And then, they became so inflated. The asset values became so inflated in Japan that, it popped eventually with the property market in Japan. And we see some similarities with China right now in terms of China's properties market's been, right now they're in deflation.
Wow.
It's a pretty serious situation. But that's China. I mean, we have our own issues that we have to worry about right now in terms of, the property market here in New York City. And right now in New York City, there's no Chinese buyers, there's no Canadian buyers.
No Russian.
No Russian. The good news for us as New York City is that we're still a global city. So the economy is still, it's stagnant. We're not in deflation, thankfully. But for certain parts of the market, I mean, even the Fed says the economy is stable, at least for now.
So where do you think mortgage rates are going to go if you were a betting man?
This year, I would say the mortgage rates are pretty much where they're going to be right now.
You don't think they're coming down?
They're not coming. I went to school for economics. So, looking at trends, how history always repeats itself, you take a look at the 10-year, the 30-year, it's not coming down because the expectations are inflation is going to remain at this level for a certain amount of time. And part of it is that, we have this deglobalization. We have to get used to higher costs and certain inputs. So mortgage rates, I'd imagine it would pretty much stay, where we are right now through the end of this year, and then we have to see what happens.
So it's not going to help the influx of people purchasing.
No,
if you say that. And what about the tariffs? How do you think that's going to affect the market?
Up to now, in terms of construction, it hasn't impacted construction yet.
But prices even for every material is going to go up: screws, nails, wood, copper.
That's what they say. But not really on a in terms of the costing that we're looking at right now for GMPs, it hasn't impacted yet. But they're telling us we have to act now.
Act now. What do you mean? In
terms of like locking in the costing, locking in some of the trades. But the challenge is with interest rates. You're borrowing, for example, if you're borrowing money at 400 over SOFR right now, that's like 8.5%, 9%.
Right.
For a construction loan.
So you can't make that back.
You can't make that. And most, most investors looking at, all these deals, what are they expecting? 6.5 yield on cost, 7 on yield on cost. They're looking at these and they're passing.
Are the banks looking to give you money?
Oh, yes, but at their rate. And right now, and going back to what you mentioned about the banks, we're going to see a refinance cycle start to occur over these next year, 2, 3, 4 years, because all of us everybody took money out in 21, 22, before rates started to go up.
So they're going to take their money out and do what?
So you're going to see, first off, everybody's going to try and refinance their assets.
At a higher rate? It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, you got to put equity in.
Right. Well,
so that's why rents, so going back to what, free market rents this year are still going to go up. Right now,
even with all the apartments coming on the market.
Yes. Well, I'm talking about New York City specific.
Yeah.
Like for us, we only deal with New York City. I only deal with Manhattan. I only deal with Queens. That's it.
It's like 20,000 condos, rentals coming on the market just from from commercial to resi. There's be a lot of apartments coming on the market.
Yes, but there's an overwhelming number of demand, and a lot of the demand it comes from it comes from basically what you saw. Remember COVID? You had a huge outflow, right? But in a way, one of the good things about COVID is it kind of accelerated that outflow migration pattern of people.
And they're coming back?
They are coming back because part of it is that we have all these graduates. Our kids, when they graduated, did they want to live out in the suburbs?
No, they want to live in New York City where they could drink and walk to a bar and have their friends and be in the best city in the world. I agree, but...
Yep. And then right now you still have that. And say for every 10 families that move out of the city, you have 30 graduates, 21, 22 years old, who need a place to stay. My cousin, right, just graduated from nursing schools, right? I told her back in March, you got to find an apartment.
What rate?
At what rate? Exactly. I told her in March, you have to find an apartment because she's graduated. She graduated this past week in May, right? She just texted me earlier this week, do you have an apartment for June 15th?
What rate?
At $2,800 a month.
You're not going to find a $2,800 apartment.
I told her to look in March. And part of it is that, it's a growing pain. When we were young, we were stupid. We were so stupid when we were young. I totally get it with young adults. They want to be in the city. And a lot of them are sharing. Going back to even with all this rental supply coming along, it gets absorbed. There's going to be a rental shortfall in 2 years because 421A expired 3 years ago, back in 21, 22. It expired. And for about 1.5 to 2 years, we didn't have a tax abatement program.
So there was no building.
There was no building for about 2 years. And even 485X is not going to address the rental issue. It's just not.
What will it take to address the affordable housing issue? You need the teachers, we need the police, we need the firemen, we need the infrastructure. What would it take to get you to build for those type of people?
To build, we need to see where the free market rents go. And what I mean by that is that right now, 485X, it doesn't. The math is not working, right? In order to promote private investment, they need a return. If someone's going to invest $1 million into so-and-so neighborhood, right, from their own private money, they have to make a return.
What kind of return would make you want to build?
Almost all equity guys are looking at, whatever, IRRs, at least, whatever it is, 20%. That's what they're expecting. 20%, that's over 3-4 years.
And what rent would that be? Just do some quick math for us.
Well, for 485X, you're looking at free market rents that have to be at least, say, about $100 a foot. Right now, you can't get...
That's like $5,000 a month.
That's like $5,000. You can't get that in the Bronx. You're not going to get... Only certain neighborhoods in Long Island City you'll get, Brooklyn you will get. But a lot of parts of New York City, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get into Staten Island. You're not going to get that in a majority of Queens outside of Long Island City. You're not going to get that right now. So where are they going to... You'll get it below 96th Street here in New York City. But the problem is that, and part of it is that there's also, the NIMBYs. There's a huge, a lot of it's local constituents. Do I want someone building next door to me in the city? No, I don't. It's unfortunate. I mean, we want to build more housing, but unfortunately, sometimes the friction is actually from our neighbor or constituents.
So this brings us back to politics. And with good, the Miller Report is about politics and real estate, because if we don't have good politicians, we don't have any value in our real estate. So now we've got a big election coming up. All the candidates have to talk about real estate, obviously. Do you have anybody who do you think is going to be the best candidate for real estate?
First off, we have to take a look at the current candidate, right? The current person that's in office, Eric Adams. Give him credit for what he's done. One is crimes decreased quite significantly since he came into office 4 years ago.
I think I took the subway for the first time last week.
You did, right? It's very different.
Yes.
It feels very different. Every day, I take the subway every day, everywhere. I take it downtown. I take it out, through Jackson Heights, Elmhurst, Ridgewood, Queens, everywhere. I take it everywhere, and every day it's still an adventure. But I do have to say, he to his credit, he has, crimes decreased, and part of it is that we have to take a look at dining room topics. What do we talk about at the dining table with our family about what matters most to us? It's quality of life. It's education for an opportunity for our children. Right? And it's
safety.
Public safety. Public safety.
It's all about safety.
It's all about public safety right now.
And real estate.
And real estate. And we can't have a city that's going to be run bankrupt right now. It's going to look like the 80s, early 80s, late 70s when the city almost went bankrupt.
Back to my question, which candidate you think was going to be best for those topics you just discussed?
Part of it is that, you take a Cuomo. Part of the benefit for Cuomo is that he knows how the political landscape works in New York City. And that matters quite a bit. Because as much as New York City wants to say it's really a diverse city, unfortunately, political institutions not very diverse. It's completely a blue state, right? And you have constituents on the far left trying to, you have candidate, Mandami. What does he want? He wants to have free MTA. He wants to freeze rent increases. Which is,
defund the police.
Defund the police. I mean, part of it is that you remember 3-4 years ago. How was New York City 3-4 years ago?
Terrible.
So while he's very well,
he's a very good speaker.
Very good speaker. His heart is the right place, but it's just not administrative. He can't run.
The companies will leave.
The companies will leave.
He doesn't believe in the state of Israel. So, Jerry, how do you think the ranked choice voting is going to affect the outcome of this election?
And it's very interesting because that's my biggest fear, going through the entire process right now is that this will be our second election for the primary in which we have ranked choices. My biggest fear is that, they would leave, is if they get, there are enough constituents just to say, hey, leave this candidate out, in which it really becomes political games. Leave them off the top 5 candidates.
And if they leave him out, then somebody could just win just because even though they were not voting.
Because they're gaming the system.
Tell us how that works.
So, in order for the Democratic primaries, in order for an individual to vote, you have to be a Democrat to vote.
In the primary.
In the primary. In the general election, anybody can vote because you're voting whichever party. So, in order for us,
the primary is June 23rd.
Yes, this in 30 days or right in 1 month. This is why we always tell everybody: just register as a Democrat. You gotta vote. Because part of it is that, you're voting the policies, right? It's quality of life. You want a pro-business atmosphere. And no matter what everybody's views are, is that we as a country cannot function unless our financial capital functions well.
Which is New York.
New York, right? You take a look all around the world. Britain can't operate unless London's doing well. In China can't operate well unless Shanghai and Hong Kong are doing well. The same thing here in the States. Right? We need Chicago. We need New York. We need our cities to be functioning correctly. It's got to be quality life. It's got to be safe. We want to be pro-business. Part of it is that, we need to cut the red tape. There's, as you know, it's just the cities, the red tape, with development. It's, we've been in the industry for so long, we kind of are used to.
So you're thinking that if somebody doesn't put a candidate down, a candidate that wasn't even a popular one could end up winning just because they could rig the system?
That's my biggest fear, because of the fact that we haven't gone through this ranked, mayor choice for many times.
I don't think people understand it is the biggest issue.
Yes, because part of it is that not enough people vote.
Not enough people vote.
Not
So
enough
everybody's
vote.
got to vote. Doesn't matter
Everyone's
who you
gotta
vote for, you got to vote.
You got to vote.
And you got to put everybody's name on there that you don't care if it's 1, 2, as long as you don't want is not on there.
Correct. So what we have is that you have, like, the Democratic Socialists. What they're trying to do is they're trying to game the system by saying, hey, leave Cuomo off. Right, your 5 ranked, you vote Stringer, Lander, Monami. It doesn't matter, but leave Cuomo off. Fine, and can that actually work on a large, scalable level?
There's only a 10-point swing right now. Everybody's got to get it and vote.
Right, and it comes down to ground, and this is a ground game, and it comes down to pure political. Who has the better ground game? Who's out and getting to constituents? And, you got to be out there, enforcing rock the vote. Everyone thinks the voting is in November. No, it's actually in June, because chances are whoever wins the Democratic nomination will win the November election.
Really?
Yeah.
In the next 30 days?
Yes.
The next 25 days?
25 days, whatever it is.
Whoever wins the primary is going to be our mayor.
Yes, you have to, and that's why everyone's got to make their voice heard here in the city. Because as you know, right now we're in the city. We had this conversation 24 months ago. Right. It's like New York City's, there's always a problem, right?
This would be a problem that's unsurmountable.
Yeah, insurmountable. What's the Jewish population here in the city? It's 20. It's the largest Jewish community outside of Israel, right?
And their vote is split. Well, I'm going to do my end and my part to get people to get out and vote. No matter who you're voting for, you do have to get out and vote and put your name on the ballot and vote. Even if you're in Florida, come back, register in New York, and vote. Very, 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 very important.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jerry. I think this is always insightful. You're so smart, and we love this guy. Thank you for coming on the Miller Report. And never bet against New York.
Never
it's
bet
gonna
against
be fine.
New York.
Thanks.